Right, so the overarching theme this week of Tory Party conference, if you've been tuning in, I'm sure you have, I can't imagine why you wouldn't be, is that those members who have bothered to turn up to it, given all the empty seats that we've seen, that they prefer to actually listen to the crazier arguments being made in the fringe events rather than listening to actual ministers speak about the stuff that's important to government, the things that they want to bring into law in the main hall. And with Sunak due to speak on the final day, well, it makes you wonder whether members will bother to stay for that or just sod off home early before the train strikes hit, which have been scheduled for that last day of Tory Party conference. And you have to ask, why would they bother when Sunak, already regarded as a complete and utter weakling of a Prime Minister, has been reminding people just how weak he is all this week long, even at this first Tory conference of his. Right, so Tory Party conference rumbles on, and there's been a bit of a theme emerging in that the government ministers are proving to be less of a hit than they might like. I can't imagine why. But actually it's the fringe events, the backbenchers and those speaking outside the main arena that are, for the most part, garnering more attention. And none of it, absolutely none of it, is doing Rishi Sunak any favours at all. Least of all Sunak himself, in fact. You know they haven't got a Scooby when they travel all the way to Manchester, hold their conference in Manchester, and then decide to announce that HS2 won't now be going to Manchester. Most delegates arrived on a day of rail strike action. Many of the empty seats we're seeing for those first speeches were down to delegates not actually able to arrive because of the strikes. And frankly, the Tories holding their conference in the north, when their base is in the south, has always been a little bit of a weird one to my mind. Is it just rubbing it in the faces of those who don't vote for them? I have no idea. Do they get off on it? But of all the places to hold their biggest annual fundraiser, they do it in a city that they're now denying something massive to that they've been promising to them for years now. Well done, Tories. Well done. It also hasn't helped when ministers who typically like to unveil a few surprises to please their membership and their donors decide to rake up old news instead, such as Jeremy Hunt has done, once more recommitting to paying for tax cuts by slashing welfare, because they seem to announce this every single year. Blatantly appealing to those who like this idea, it is a vote winner because it is popular amongst those with money to batter those with next to none. It wasn't even his biggest sham declaration, though, because he also declared a ban on debanking MPs in the wake of the Nigel Farage-Coutts crisis, which was abject nonsense from start to finish. He's going to change the rules so nobody can be debanked for being politically correct, even though the Financial Conduct Authority has already investigated this and found no evidence that it is happening or has ever happened, including in connection with Nigel Farage. But of course the Tories have let Farage in, so is it any wonder Tory ministers are now trotting out lines to appeal to the UKIP types or worse? In fact, this entire event is sounding more UKIP-y than the last year, and the year before that. They're only ever moving further and further to the right. This was right up there with Sunak himself trying to pretend inflation was a tax, though, wasn't it? It's that incredibly ridiculous level of dishonesty that they've peaked at. On top of that, discussions have happened in the main hall by main speakers talking about dumping human rights, Brexit still, attacking trans rights, and the point just keeps getting reinforced. They are just becoming more right-wing and extreme. And that's the main hall. And that's all happening in Sunak's name. That's stuff he's signed off on. That's stuff he's endorsed. But the thing with Tories is no matter how much you give them, they want more. They keep taking more. So even though those discussions, as mad as they are, have been happening in the main hall, the more popular events have been happening outside of it, and they're even more crackers. Liz Truss's speech outside the main arena ended up standing room only. Farage was there. Priti Patel was there, all hosted by the business editor at GB News, no less. So little surprise she started by bigging them up, despite them having just suspended 3 of their highest profile presenters in the last week. No doubt if she fancies returning to the Tory leadership job, she's getting her media support in early. And she rattled off even more extreme measures, her utter refusal to accept that her tax cuts last year were wrong by demanding more of them. She wants to see a return to fracking. It was just madness. But it appeals to the faithful, and they elected her over Sunak, and now Sunak is what they've got anyway, none of whom chose him. It wasn't just Liz Truss undermining Sunak and exposing his weakness, though. I spoke in a video yesterday about the new Conservatives faction having launched their own manifesto to try and get Sunak to implement, not in control of the party really as he is, otherwise you wouldn't get groups of his own MPs feeling so emboldened as to write up their own legislation and try to force their leader to adopt it. The chair of this faction, Danny Kruger, was at a fringe event himself where he said The penny is dropping amongst people in Westminster that the government doesn't run the government. There's a huge movement going on globally to create essentially a world government that will have power to dictate to national governments what they should do in anticipation of another pandemic. And he went on by saying there is no greater threat to our national democracy. Absolutely bonkers position to take. Implies Sunak isn't really in charge and that other governments are pulling the strings and that we have to do what other people say in regards to pandemics and stuff like that. Well, we did so well with the pandemic, didn't we? I can't imagine why other people think we need to be told what to do next time. Why does this man still have the whip? Why does Liz Truss, after her arrival, was a walking, talking, batshit undermining of Sunak as well, with the attendants just reinforcing that? Making Kruger's daft comments even dafter was that the event he spoke at was a joint one run between the Institute of Economic Affairs and the Taxpayers Alliance. Who runs them? Who funds you? Oh, dark and shady think tank types? Who's pulling Kruger's string in this case? The icing on the cake, though, was the speech that was given by Boris Johnson's superfan, Lord Cruddas. As I said earlier, Tory conference is all about the funding. It's all about wooing the donors, bringing in the money, and Cruddas himself was one of those. But he stood up and said to his fellow wealthy Tory money spaffers, accusing Sunak of destroying the party, and said, I'm asking all Conservative Party donors, big and small, to stop funding the Conservative Party until we can implement constitutional changes. So you're launching a coup to defund the party until it does things your way, then? I thought don't they always tell us that the trade union barons are always dictating to the Labour Party and that Labour has to jump when they say, has to say how high whenever they say jump? What exactly is this game here, then? The Cruddas way, frankly, is to bring back Boris as fast as possible, an unelected peer in the House of Lords. But he holds the Tory whip there, and still, Sunak couldn't take any action against him either. Or wouldn't take any. Weak. He's weaker than my mother's tea, which is little more than frightened milk. Sunak is in an absolute boatload of bother and just appears to be waving and grinning his way inanely through it all as if it isn't happening. And this morning it just continued as Susanna Reid rinsed him on GMB, putting to him the example of an 80-year-old pensioner living in a mobile home who has had to shell out on vet bills, his pet insurance doubled as a result, which combined with the cost of living crisis and the rising cost of food, the guy has had to consider using a food bank. Reid put to Sunak, should he go to the food bank or get rid of his dog? Well, not happy with being presented with such an example, Sunak decided to try and make up his own example about a single mum in work and answer that instead, though Reid didn't let him, wouldn't have a bar of it, and the entire interview descended into yet another self-inflicted car crash on Rishi Sunak's part. This conference has become a mess, and it's entirely of Sunak's own making. No matter how many times he tries to pretend that many of the current problems didn't happen on his watch, like the Tories have now gone from blaming the last Labour government to blaming the Tory government prior to 2015, when Sunak himself entered Parliament. He has been limper than a vicar's handshake ever since he became PM, refusing to mete out discipline, despite all the scandals he's had to deal with and been involved in. So now he's at the point where he'd be a hypocrite if he started to do that. And of course that means there is no discipline, there is no direction, and he will be constantly undermined by members of his own party, no matter how mad they might be. They will continue to become more dysfunctional and end up in more disarray because of it. That, frankly, should be a cause for celebration, but unfortunately it comes with a warning label, given the opportunity that gives to an equally odious individual like Keir Starmer. I personally can't see Sunak lasting a lot longer. It's not so much an election campaign the Tories might be about to embark on, but with Sunak's one-year grace period almost up, just a week or so's time, it might be a leadership election in the offing instead. What do you reckon, though? Leadership, challenge, or election? Might Sunak call one early just to flip his naysayers the bird, or is he too chicken even for that? Will things continue to linger and crumble even more? How do you see things playing out? Do let me know in the comments below and be part of the conversation. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where Liz Truss spelt out what might be the beginnings of another mad manifesto of her own last month. Would a leadership challenge see her return? Would she go for it? What a horrible thought that is. And I'll hopefully see you on the next video. Cheers, folks.